Hello, welcome to Creative Futures, the programme where we talk to creatives about their experiences being freelance and working in the real world. I'm Graham Park, this is Glyndwr TV, and today we're joined by an illustrator who also works for TPAUB, the Art Centre in Wrexham, and also works with Big Ideas Wales. Please welcome Heather Wilson.
Thanks very much for having me.
You are very welcome, and thanks for coming along to talk to the students. We've got students in the studio, we've got students online, and we'll have some questions for you later. But first of all, you're an illustrator first and foremost, and a graduate of Glyndwr University. So tell us how you became an illustrator and why you ended up at Glyndwr.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Alston Moor in Cumbria, which is a very rural part of the country. And all of the other universities that I'd applied for mostly thinking about their proximity to where I lived. So I was mostly applying for northeast universities like Newcastle and Sunderland. But the odd one out, if you like, was Glyndwr, because they had the illustration for graphic novels course. And at the time, which was about 2008-ish, it was the only one in the country where you could go and do a comic specific course, and that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, but the art and design school here did have a good reputation anyway, though, didn't it?
Yeah, but I hadn't heard of it. It was I like literally I went round a big UCAS fair. You put all your catalogues in your bag because you're supposed to. And if I remember rightly, sounds terrible in retrospect, but for a joke, one of my friends was like, "Have you got all the ones from Wales?" So we just put all the ones from Wales in. So when I went home and went through them all, I found the Glyndwr page with the illustration for graphic novels course on there.
And otherwise you wouldn't have?
Otherwise I wouldn't have. Totally wasn't on my radar.
Okay, so what was it like moving from beautiful Cumbria to beautiful northeast Wales?
Yeah, well, like there's a lot of similarities, and I think that being such a country bumpkin, I think Wrexham was the ideal place for me to be because it introduced me to some civilization. Like the first fortnight that I lived here, I jumped every time an ambulance went by because I was completely not used to hearing a siren in day-to-day life. If I heard a siren before, someone I knew was in trouble because like the community was that small. So like, and also right, you can buy milk here on like a Tuesday afternoon, which in Garrigill, the village I lived in, shops shut on a Tuesday afternoon. Like you can get milk 24 hours a day in Wrexham. And that was actually ideal for me and like what my experiences were, because it was access to lots of creative and cultural opportunity, and just sort of a bigger version of the world without it being too daunting for my little country mouse self.
Right. So how did you end up being an illustrator? I mean, did you do art at school?
I think like a lot of kids that draw a lot, people sort of look over your shoulder and go, "Oh, that's quite good. Do you want to be an artist when you grow up?" And I would very sullenly be like, "No, artists are not important." I was like that kid. So it took me a long time, really.
What, did you know what you wanted to be? You said you didn't want to be an artist, but did you know what you did want to be?
It was like a different thing every week. It would be like, "I'm going to be a nurse," or "I'm going to be a teacher," or something. It would change all the time. But the thing is, what I actually did with my time was always reflected in that I was always drawing pictures and making art. I wasn't really doing anything serious towards any of my other goals at any time.
So what point did you think, well, actually, yes, this is something I do want to pursue?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, I don't know. I don't think it was a single decision taken at any point. I think it's a lot of things, especially when you're younger. There's a cumulative kind of thing that happens where you have to make decisions in a time frame. So I knew that I needed to go to university if I ever wanted to leave the little field that I lived in. So I knew that I had to do that, and I was keen to do it as soon as possible, which meant making decisions as soon as I'd finished my A-levels to like go to university. And because there wasn't really anything else that I was excited about or good at, like that's what I was doing art. And I think that was a conversation I had to be having with myself sort of the whole time through doing my degree about like, what are the outcomes of this going to be, like in terms of being an artist and feeling good about it. I think that there are a lot of stereotypes around artists as self-indulgent that I definitely had internalised. And I think actually, as we will see as we talk about some of the projects that I've done, there's so much social and educational practical application for art. And I think probably the first year that we had a Creative Futures was probably quite useful for me, because I remember going to a talk that was about arts and mental health and being an arts therapist. And while I didn't feel like that was necessarily appropriate for me, it definitely sort of rang that bell about, like, it's not just drawing pictures for your own sake. It's like you can have a positive impact on other people through art.
Okay, so tell us more about that. You did your degree. You did an MA as well.
I did, yeah.
But were you doing anything outside of university while studying for your degree?
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff going on. So during my BA, we had a project, and it was to make your own magazine. It was a group project, and the magazine we put together, the concept of it was a steampunk comic about introducing female characters from history who'd been involved in science. So we did these comics, and we ended up...
Hang on, female characters, like real characters or fictional
yeah,
characters?
like it was a combo. So this is 2012, so we don't have female Doctor Who yet. So that was how we were pitching it. Right. It's like it's female Doctor Who, and she has a time traveling train, and she goes back in time and meets different important female scientists and learns about stuff. Which does not seem revolutionary 10 years later, but we thought it was a fun idea. Yeah. And through that, we ended up working with what's now Explore, but was then TechniQuest, based on this campus here. And we worked with TechniQuest to apply for funding from Arts Council Wales.
So just for those who don't know, TechniQuest is part of, it's on the site of Glyndwr University. What is TechniQuest?
It's a children's science museum, effectively. So we worked with them to put in this Arts Council bid, and we got some money, and we made a comic that we distributed to schools, and we ran a competition in schools for kids as like a kind of a project where they researched a female scientist, made their own comic about that scientist, and then we compiled them in their own amazingly cute magazine of artwork the kids had made, and we launched it with an exhibition of their artwork on International Women's Day, and that was in TechniQuest. And what else did we do on that project? It was really good. It was a really important gateway for me in terms of my interests and just seeing practical applications for comics.
Is this your first experience of as an artist working with the community?
Yeah, I think so. Like as an artist with a capital A, definitely. I mean, I'd done a lot of volunteering in my teenage years as like, it was basically like a hippie summer camp that I used to get sent to, and I would volunteer and teach kids how to make dream catchers and stuff. It was like proper great. So like I'd done lots of work with kids, but this was more sort of as an artist with a sort of teaching kind of role almost. Sorry, were you all right for sound?
No, it's all right, carry on.
Yeah, so we did that project, and we got amazing feedback from schools over it, and we had a lot of kids did Jane Goodall, so we sent some of those comics to the Jane Goodall Foundation, and they wrote us the sweetest letter back. So that was a great project.
What's the Jane Goodall Foundation?
Oh, Jane Goodall's the lady who did a lot of research into chimpanzees and chimpanzee communication and conservation.
So why did you write to her?
Because so many of the kids chose her as their scientist to make their comic about, yeah.
And did you get a response?
Yeah.
Sorry. All right. You okay?
Ask a question, Al.
All right. Before you come and tell us about Jane Goodall, so you're working in the community. Do you think that helped you? Because you're working with Big Ideas Wales, which is a government initiative from the Welsh Government to help under 25s get business experience. Is that right?
Yeah. So let's see.
This is Big Ideas Wales, Welsh Government initiative that offers grants. It has podcasts on the website. It hosts webinars, generates ideas, and gives startup guides to people under 25 who want to set up in business. Now, obviously, a lot of creatives, a lot of artists, a lot of people who are going to be freelancers will need help like this. And so what I'm saying is your community work, do you think that's helped you get involved with Big Ideas?
Yeah, and definitely work in school settings. So most of what I do in that role is visiting secondary schools, visiting colleges, visiting universities, like I'm doing today, to talk about like what are the practical skills that you need to run your own business. What does that look like? To get people thinking about what a business is as well. I think again, this is where sort of stereotypes and preconceived notions play in a lot, because when people think about being a business person, there's this kind of Dragon's Den, The Apprentice kind of person in a suit kind of vibe that is not really the full story or the full picture. So what's quite nice about Big Ideas Wales is that the role models that they have going to schools cover a really broad base of different kinds of businesses, different kinds of people, all different ages, all different backgrounds, people who have a higher level of education, people who've never been at uni at all, like a real mixture. I think that's really great. There's one business that is like, has owls, which I'm a big fan of. They have owls. So it's like really broad.
From chimpanzees to owls in the same session. How did you get involved with Big Ideas Wales though? Did they come to you?
So from what I can remember, it was probably through the Careers Centre at Glyndwr, because they were really valuable for me as a resource. So let's see, when I was so back to back with doing the BA, I then did my MA, and that is for a very classic situation of like, so I graduated in 2012 or 13, and we were still in very much, it's probably similar to as we are now, but very much in a recession situation. I was applying for jobs every week in supermarkets, in shoe shops, and getting nowhere, failing their personality quizzes, not having a great time. And so like I was really looking for other ways to do that kind of CV building. So I was doing lots of volunteering. I did some volunteering with what was then Oriel Wrexham, which used to be based in the library in the town centre. It's since become TPAB. We'll get to that later.
Yes, we'll get to that in a minute.
We'll get to that in a bit. But it was also, went to the Careers Centre and sort of said to them, what kind of opportunities can you put me in touch with? Because I'm a bit stuck here. I'm not getting any progress.
Yeah, so you've been, rather than sitting around hoping for things or sitting around moaning about things, you were being proactive.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you've got to be. It's like essential. You can just go to university, do the modules that you're given, hand your work in, and receive your bit of paper at the end and feel like that's enough. But in reality, it won't earn you the most valuable thing that you can get out of university, which is like the connections to different organisations and people who can refer to you when, oh, I've met such and such, exactly. They know how to do this, they would be perfect for this project. And that network building is absolutely crucial.
Yeah, so presumably you're going to exhibitions and going to events and meeting people. So you mentioned CV.
Yeah.
So were you very conscious about building a CV while being a student? Or was it something that just happened?
No, it definitely became something that I was very conscious of, because I felt at the time that I was going to have to skip a bit. So the kinds of jobs that were like entry level, I'll just run a till somewhere kind of jobs that were just going to keep the lights on for me, because I wasn't able to find one. I was like, right, we're going to have to like look at something a little bit more specific skills wise. So that's what I spent the time kind of working towards.
And you said you volunteered at Oriel, which is now TPAB.
Yes.
Did you just walk in and go, have you got any jobs?
I literally did. I walked in and I was like, would you like a volunteer? And they were like, ooh, people don't do that. And there's a lovely lady who used to work there at the time called Honor, and she just went up and got me a form and I filled it in. And because they at that time didn't have a huge volunteer infrastructure, it meant I could kind of go like, I would like to do this for you, is that good? And they were able to say yes. So what I mostly did for them was I made interpretation of their exhibitions that was aimed at children. So, you know, you would go to an exhibition and they would have a lovely little white sheet of paper with an artist statement on that you could read and sort of have information about the exhibition, and I would turn those into little activity packs with sort of like, how many sunflowers can you find in this exhibition?
Right.
Draw yourself a tractor, like things that would make sense for whatever the
But
exhibition
where were you getting
was.
all this inspiration from? Because if you're an illustrator, right, you're volunteering and you're working with children, presumably the TechnoQuest stuff kind of
Yeah,
helped
definitely.
you.
I think you can see there's a thread that follows through between those things, and most of the projects that I was doing on my MA were sort of with a similar audience in mind. So I really was focusing in on educational comics as like the thing I was most interested in. So my MA project, the main bulk of it was around making resources about flooding, which is not glamorous or exciting. Flooding. So I made a whole set of so essentially, like, there are people whose job it is to go into schools to talk to children about how floods are dangerous, and so they shouldn't go swimming in a flood or like that kind of thing, and to talk to them about the kind of geographical factors and environmental factors that create the circumstances that cause flooding. And it's all very dry, so I made this sort of very colourful resource website that would
Oh, right, okay, that's making sense now.
so you would be able to have a map, if you can visualise it. I haven't got it to just point at it, that would be good. But if you imagine a map, and on the map are little homes with characters, and you can click on the characters and a little bubble comes up and the character tells you something about their relationship to the flood. So you click on the farmer and he tells you how it's affecting him. You click on the little old lady who will not leave her home under any circumstances, and you'll see what she thinks of it.
Yeah.
You can click on a fire brigade member or a politician, and they'll get a little bubble and get kind of a sense of the overarching situation. And it's kind of inspired by, I don't know if people know it, there's an Usborne kids book called Things People Do, and I was absolutely obsessed with it. Every single page is about a different job, and all of the people have really like puntastic names.
All right, okay.
So for example, the builder in the book is called Manual Labour.
Manuel labour, surely. Okay.
And so anyway, I loved that book so much, and I spent so much time looking at it as a kid and learning about like, oh, this is what the world for grown-ups is like, you know, that you don't get to see when you're at school all day. And then coming back to it as a grown-up and being like, there's so much richness of content here that like I didn't pick up on as a child, but that I was learning about. Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent. All of this was to get back to the other volunteering project that I did, which was through Glyndwr Careers, which was a project that I worked on with another student called Kirsty Gorn. She's also an illustrator, look her up. And we worked together to volunteer for a charity based in Chester called Save the Family. And what they do is that they look for housing solutions for families who might be, for financial reasons, at risk of children having to go into care. So what they look to do is to house the whole family together, so that there doesn't have to be a separation where there's no reason to cause for one except for like that the parents have no money. So we were raising money for that charity, and we did it through an empty shop pop-up project. So they had this shop in Mould. They didn't have enough volunteers to keep it open. It wasn't really making any money. And so what we did is that we came up with this concept of the shop as a little miniature house that you could walk around. And we took all of the donations and rearranged them so that instead of it just being a shop, it would be like an experience. So you would go in and there's like a kitchen area and a garden area and a bedroom area, and for it to be more fun and playful as a shopping experience. And then you would tell people about it and get them to come too. And then we also used it as a sort of exhibition space. So we blagged all of our art student friends to make some artwork for us. We blagged the university to print some big banners up for us. Everyone we knew, we asked them really jammily like to do stuff for us, and they did. So we had like a video made for free. We had workshops, we had creative writing workshops, poetry workshops, observational drawing workshops that we ran out of the space. And then we charged a ticket price for people to come to those. And then when people came, they would end up buying things. So that's how we ran that project. And again,
Sorry, no, sorry,
No,
carry on.
it's fine.
No, so this is all this volunteering is looking great on your CV, but obviously volunteering doesn't pay the bills, does
It doesn't pay the bills,
So
no.
you get your MA,
Yeah.
and you're out in the big wide world.
Yeah,
How
but
did you-
now
how did you
I've
start
got
making
project
money?
management experience.
There you go, exactly.
And that was a thing I could write. I had references now from this charity, from TechnoQuest, from places that I had not been an employee of necessarily, but that I had people who were really willing to vouch for me. I had all of these.
So where did you
different-
go with this CV and go, look, this is what I can do?
Yeah, so I sort of did the next sort of stages. Firstly, I had a job at Oriel Wrexham, so I became a relief gallery assistant. So a relief gallery assistant is not a reliable form of permanent income, because you're essentially, what you do is you cover people's holidays
Got
and
you.
sick leave. But it was great because I was like part of the team, and it really made that volunteering time that I'd put in like feel like it had paid off. And again, just in terms of adding on those skills, I was doing a reception desk and I was answering phones and I was doing admin, and I could tick all of that off for people to say that I could do it. Also, similar sort of time, I did the mandatory, you live in Wrexham, so you have to be a temp at Moneypenny for a bit. Like, I just feel like that's what happens to everyone who's here long enough. At some point, you'll be a temp at Moneypenny. Don't know why, it just is. And then, what else? So then I was basically really pursuing educational comics as like the field that I wanted to be in. So I was going to big comics fairs, like Thought Bubble is like the key one, and I would be clubbing together with all of my friends to have a table, because none of us individually could afford to have a table. So we would have a table that was split between 3 or 4 people, and we'd have like a narrow little shelf on it. And then
That's really good.
And then I would be business carding people like mad. And like in terms of sales, at all of those, I would be delighted if I broke even. With the transport of going to Leeds, like if I hadn't had to include that, I could have like told myself I was making money, but I wasn't really. I was breaking even every time in terms of actual sales. But where the monetary value, if you like, from it was in being able to give out business cards to people and then getting emails coming through when I'd come home of people who would want to work with me on different projects.
Tell us about Miss Heather Comics. What's the history of that? When did you start that? It's a website, right?
It's my website. It's basically, it was a, what would you call it, professional development module at uni where they tell you have to have a website.
Yeah.
And so that was good that they made us do that, because it meant that at the time that I was sort of dishing out all these business cards, there was somewhere actually to send people that was like, at the time, up to date and pretty, relatively speaking, quite professional.
So how important is an online, if you're an artist, I mean, I was talking to you earlier about how basically what you do, traditionally, artists is pencil and paper, but you know, how important is a website, how important is social media about, you know, letting people know what you do?
Yeah, well, your website is your portfolio. So like, it's not that it never happens for anyone ever now, but the chances are you are not taking a big A3 or bigger black portfolio into a lift with you and going to 100 different agencies or publishers or whoever it is you're trying to impress. Like, your website is going to do that function for you. So it is important, and it's also, I think, a website's really good for crossing that mental threshold of like, I am an artist now, I've got a website. I think it's a really good confidence builder, because nobody ever comes up to you and says, do you know what, you're an artist now, it's happened, congratulations, here is your official little artist badge, your beret, here you go. That doesn't happen. You become an artist when you start telling people that you're an artist.
So you've got to believe in what you do.
You've got to believe what you do, and if you don't believe in what you do, you just got to fake it until you make it, which I know that's such a cliche piece of advice, but genuinely.
No, you've got to come across confident.
Yeah, but like, even if you don't come across as confident, you're just like, an artist is someone who makes art, but no one will know that you're an artist unless you're telling them. So you just have to, I think, making the website is part of that, entering the public sphere with your art and saying, I am an artist, this is my stuff, this is what I do.
Do you use social media as well?
I do use social media as well. We've been talking about this before this conversation, and I probably don't use it to its maximum potential.
What's the main, because you told me you'd rather concentrate on one platform.
Yeah, I think that because social media is so...
Fragmented.
Well, no, I was going to say because it has such a sort of stranglehold on your life in some ways. Like it can be a huge time suck, and you can spend so much time looking at other people's social media, updating your own social media, going through this kind of, I think you can get into a negative space of like comparison and news following and just sort of, I think it can be draining. And so I think that by choosing one platform and saying, right, this is the thing I'm going to do well, you can like spend less time being sort of orbiting that whirlpool.
So which platform do you favour?
I'd say Instagram is probably the most useful for me personally. There's a lot of comics artists get a lot out of Twitter. There's a really good community there. There's really good links for like particularly like the British comic scene, and you can find these sort of conversations where everyone who has a table at Thought Bubble, everyone who works for particular independent publishers, they're all sort of there, and you can make yourself part of that conversation. It's definitely useful. But for me, I don't want to spend my time on Twitter.
Does Heather's, what is it, Heather's Comics?
Miss Heather Comics.
Miss Heather Comics. Does that bring any income? Can you make any money out of that?
Yeah, well, it's the name for all of my freelance work. Like, so that is illustration commissions, graphic design commissions.
So people can contact you, see your website and go, wow, that looks great, and contact you. Yeah.
So it's all there. So workshops, youth work, all of that stuff.
So what about dealing with clients? I mean, how did you learn how to do that? Did you touch upon that at university, or suddenly are you like, oh my God, I've got to...
we definitely spent some time out at university, because I mean the whole function of doing an illustration degree is kind of framed around your tutors are your client. They're giving you a brief. They have things that they want you to deliver, and it's more. I think that's one of the differences between an illustration degree and maybe a fine art degree, because a fine art degree is much more about finding your own voice and finding what you want to do, and an illustration degree is more about, here are loads of different challenges, what would you respond to those with? Or at least that was my experience of it. And I think, so I think that there's that. And then also like doing things like working with Save the Family, like they were the client, you know, everything that we presented in that shop needed to sort of meet their approval and meet their expectations for the project.
So again, so that volunteering is giving you experience of dealing with clients today that you want to charge money for.
Yeah, and then again, and then I started getting clients from doing comic conventions. So one of the big ones was there's a group called Applied Comics, etc. So they are kind of focused on matching up, what would you call them? Different kinds of organisations with artists to do comics or graphics kind of interpretation of things. So the first project I did for them, off the back of having them seeing the Clockwork Express stuff that we'd done, was they did a comic called Asteroid Belter, which was distributed to schools, primary schools in Newcastle. And for that I did a comic that was about how a heartbeat works, and so they matched me up with Dr. Winnie Tung, who was like a cardiological expert, and a writer as well, so the three of us worked on this project.
Did she bring a heart along to the meeting?
She did not, no.
Okay.
Well, like, this is the thing, is so
I meant a mechanical one, obviously.
This is super normal now, but it was like all long distance. So like,
of course,
Raymond, who was the writer, lived in Spain. Winnie was in Newcastle. I was in Wrexham, and we were doing it all by email and telephone.
So, I mean, how do clients differ? Do you get some clients who give you total free rein, and do you get other clients who go, no, it has to be like this?
Yeah, definitely. There's a huge variety. The middle ground is, I think, the best. I think when you're given too much freedom, what often will happen is you weren't being given too much freedom. The client just didn't know how to articulate what they wanted, and so you present the work to them and they want you to do it all again because they oh, this isn't what we were imagining at all. So there's that. If you can get really clear guidelines, but also a respect that you actually do know what you're doing.
What happens?
And that you make your creative decisions for a reason. So, you know, you might get the kind of feedback that's something like, oh, can it not be green instead?
Yes.
And you might be like, I can't put a red and a green next to each other. It won't be readable to someone who is colourblind. And sort of having to make those explanations all the time.
Do you get clients that are really difficult to work for or work with? And if so, how do you deal with that?
I don't think there's any that I would put in that really difficult category. I think when I've found that someone is too difficult, I think that the easiest thing to do is to like, all right, well, here is the project that you wanted, and this is finished now, and you don't have to maintain that connection going forward. It is tricky stuff to manage though.
Have you ever turned down work because you think this sounds awful?
Yeah.
You have, but
Yeah.
that's a good position to be in.
Well, I think and that's the thing. You have to be in the position to be able to do it. I think the thing to be the most thoughtful about really is sort of knowing what your value is and finding out at the start of the project whether that client is going to respect that value. And I think that's probably why I don't feel like I've had that many difficult clients, because I know what to look for near the beginning of that process to be able to spot it.
The experience has taught you that.
Yeah, but I think there's Dan Berry's not a tutor here now, but this is like classic Dan Berry advice that I'm now going to regurgitate as if I thought of it.
Former tutor at the art and design school.
So he always said like there's kind of a triangle of 3 things that you can have in any illustration project. So things can be fast, things can be cheap, or things can be good. And there can only ever be 2 out of those 3 things. They can't be all 3. So if someone wants you to do something fast and good and cheap, you need to be able to tell them that you can't do it, because that project is doomed from the beginning. If someone wants something fast and cheap and you can say to them, I can do that, this is the kind of quality you can expect, and send them something from your portfolio that shows what you can manage. So for me, that might be something like, it's flat colours, there's no shading, this is what it looks like. And they might go, oh no, that's not what we want. We want it to look like this thing from your portfolio. And they send me something that I spent full 2 weeks working on. And you go like, okay, well you can have that. And because my diary's clear, I can even do it fast. But it's going to cost you this amount of money instead. And I think if you can early on make that negotiation, then you'll be all right.
That's good. I think that's really good advice. Go back to Big Ideas Wales. Can they help with things like this, like negotiating and dealing with clients?
Yeah, so like there's a whole package of resources on Big Ideas Wales that is so extensive that I wouldn't want to guarantee you like, yes, there's definitely a module on that topic, but there's all kinds of resources there. There's printable business plans. There's the whole directory of different role models so that you can search by the business type and find someone who does that kind of business and email them and ask them questions, and that includes, sort of for the purposes of Creative Futures, game designers and all kinds of companies like that. So that's worth looking at.
Let's go back. Let's talk about TPOW, because you
Yes.
mentioned Oreo and it became TPOW.
It became TPOW, yeah.
And then it's got this amazing premises now. What it used to be the premises?
So it was the former People's Market.
Right. Okay. But basically, for those who don't know, TPOW is a community-based art/market, isn't it? Indoors.
Yeah. So it's an indoor market. It's a multi-storey car park. It's an art gallery. It's a food court. It is a performance space. It's a community building. It's probably other things that I haven't thought of. It's like you can get your hair cut there. You can get a milkshake. You can look at some sculptures. It's amazing. Obviously, I work there, so I would say that. But
Yeah, so just your official title, you're the Arts Engagement Coordinator.
Yes.
What does that mean? What do you do?
So I'm predominantly responsible for education kind of liaison kind of stuff. So when schools come and do a visit with us, when colleges, when universities come and see us, working with family groups or youth groups. We have a youth advisory board. We run things like Crew Kelv and Portfolio, which are again for sort of secondary school aged kids. We have a family art club. I'm not like physically there running every single one of these things, but I'm coordinating their delivery.
But this has been your full-time job since January.
Yeah,
Before
it's
that, you were
new.
part-time, weren't you?
Before that, I was volunteer coordinator, so I was just focused on volunteers, work experience, and sort of some of what I'm doing now, but in a less formal
so while
way.
being an illustrator, you're still volunteering part-time at TPOB, yeah?
No, volunteer coordinator was my job. It was just
right,
a part-time job.
Oh, I see. Sorry.
No, it's everyone
I
gets confused
understand
by
now.
it because it has volunteer.
Yes.
So I was.
You were helping people come and volunteer.
Exactly.
Got you. Apologies.
So that was good because.
So you're part-time at TPOB as well as being an illustrator.
Yes.
Right. But now you're full-time. So how
Yes.
does that affect your first love, which is illustrating?
Like a lot, a lot. But I think that I think I'm quite comfortable with the compromise that it presents, because what it means is that my day job is doing the stuff that I care the most about, which is engaging directly with communities of people to make art accessible. And like that's fundamentally what I'm most interested in.
Right.
One of the reasons I love comics so much is because they are a very unfiltered communication style. They're very direct, they're very immersive, and they bring ideas to a person. They're not academic textbooks or other things that might just need like more background knowledge to get into. Like for most people, a comic is like a pretty good starting point. And I think that TPOB can be that for contemporary arts practice. It's not an art gallery that is for special occasions where you travel far away and you see something very hyped. It's about like, where do you go as part of your day-to-day routine in the same way that you do go and buy bread somewhere. You can go and visit the art gallery and see things that are amazing quality in your hometown. And I think that's really important and valuable. And I like that we're able to give that to, I don't know, just like, it's a welcoming space. It's not an intimidating space.
So, I mean, how reliant on volunteers is TPOB and places like TPOB?
I would say that we can always use more.
Right, okay.
Like
So I know some of our students have already been in touch and have volunteered.
We do have volunteers from
if you say you can have too much, how would someone go about volunteering at TPOB?
Okay, so the first thing they can do is they can visit the TPOB website, which is tpob.wales. There's a page there called Get Involved. That'll give you lots of background information about the kinds of projects that volunteers can get involved with. And there's like a little form you can fill in with your email address. Alternatively, if you already know you're definitely on board and you know you want to volunteer, you can email teampoub@wrexham.gov.uk and we'll send you an application form. And then, assuming that everything's good with your application form, we'll do an induction session with you and you can come and get involved.
So, but the thing, we keep talking about art, exhibitions, but you have live bands as well, don't you?
Yeah,
you have
do.
music. So any students who are maybe doing the music tech or sound tech, there'd be a place for them as well.
They can absolutely get involved, yes.
And what about if someone wants to exhibit at TPOB?
So we have two major open exhibitions that rotate. So each year we either have the TPOB Open or the Wrexham Open. The TPOB Open or Print International. Mm-hmm. Wrexham Open is the old name for TPOB Open.
Yeah, okay.
You see what I did?
Yeah.
So the TPOB Open is every other year and it is open to all types of work. So whether that's textiles or ceramics or paintings, whatever it is, you can enter it. It's literally open. And then Print International is open to anything in a print medium. And we work with the Regional Print Centre at College Cambria to deliver that one. So those are the two primary ways that you can get work on a wall. I think that it's important when you think about trying to get an exhibition to have an awareness about how far ahead programme planning happens at most galleries. Right. Because we get requests from students all the time being like, oh, I'd like to put a show up. And it's like, we will be booked for the next 3 years.
Really?
Yeah, so you need to... As
soon as you start university, you should be looking at places to exhibit, is basically what you're saying.
I think and I think open exhibitions are your ideal gateway because they give you the opportunity to give yourself some name recognition with the staff at a gallery, so that when you do pitch something bigger later, they go like, oh yeah, remember they made this excellent thing that we showed.
And presumably, like, again, that's a good thing on your CV. I exhibited at TPAUB in my final year at university.
Yeah, and it just gives you an idea of like some of the nuts and bolts stuff. I mean, you'll get some of this through doing your own graduate shows, but you know, having an actual awareness of like how to mirror plate something is good.
I don't know how to mirror plate anything, but
No.
what about if you wanted to, if you had a band, if you wanted to perform there, how would you go about that?
Yeah, so for that one, I would say to go via the generic TPAUB app
Right, okay.
at wrexham.gov.uk address. We do have lots of different kinds of performance opportunities that range from sort of Saturday lunchtimes to support for bigger bands that will travel to perform at TPAUB. I don't handle those ones, so I'm maybe not the best person.
Does TPAUB ever put on any club nights?
Club nights?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I wouldn't describe anything we do as a club night.
It's a good space for one, though, I'm thinking. Okay, I'll just hold that
All right,
thought.
well,
okay.
you email me.
I will. So, what you mentioned, so everything you just said is on the TPAUB website. You can find all that information there.
Yeah, you should be
Let's
able
go
to
back
find
to
that there.
Big Ideas Wales. How would people, I mean, you could search it, but it's on part of the Wales government website, isn't it?
I think it's got its own.
But if you just search
See,
Big
now,
Wales
now,
Idea,
if you
Big
search
Idea
it,
Wales, sorry.
I'm like suddenly
Big
not
Idea Wales.
confident telling you the web address in case
No,
I say it
but
wrong.
I can tell you now for a fact, you just search Big Idea Wales, and that's because that's how
It'll
I
come
found
up.
it.
It will.
And people can obviously get in touch with them, but how would they go about applying for a grant? Because it's up to £2,000, isn't it?
Yeah, so grants, it depends really what your business is, what stage you're at. But yes, that's where you can look. And they can pair you up with a mentor to help you through that process too. So yeah, get in touch with them directly.
Yeah, I think you're not the first person we've had on this programme who's mentioned mentors. And so that sounds like a really, really good thing, opportunity to take up on.
Yeah, like especially if you sort of have a clear idea of what your kind of goals are, even if it's not perfect, like crystal clear, if you know sort of the area that you want to be working in and what the stage you're at is a sort of a refining stage rather than an ideas generating stage, a mentor is brilliant.
Yeah, for those of you who are watching this on our Teams group, we've just Neil's just posted the links to the Big Idea Wales website, so thank you for that, Neil. And of course, if anyone's got any questions as we carry on, just shove them in the chat. How is technology? Because we were talking earlier about how being hooked up on Teams and on YouTube and online. 10 years ago, that would be really difficult to do. How has technology changed the industry that you work in over the past decade?
So like for me, the main thing that technology has enabled me to do, and thankfully kind of since the start really, is to be able to deliver projects across the whole country but while being based in Wales, and not being able to basically take on a lot of work in other places without having to pay the higher rent there.
Pre-pandemic, did you ever have to go and meet a client and do a long journey and then come home and go, well, that was a waste of time?
No, I don't think I ever did, because I was still able to use sort of Skype.
Right, okay.
There are some projects that I would have to travel, but I never felt
probably
like
not
any
so
of them
much now, though.
Yeah, they never felt like a waste of time, and there's usually a specific reason that I needed to travel there. So for example, I did a project with the Great North Children's Hospital in Newcastle, and again that was through Applied Comics, etc. And I went there to take photos of their MRI scanner because I couldn't find reference photo angles of the machine that I needed, and also to get a sense of the whole process of going in.
Well, did you need to make an illustration of the MRI scanner?
Yeah, so, well, we'll get to that. So essentially we were making a comic that was for kids to be able to read while they were in the waiting room to go for their MRI scan.
Brilliant.
So that they would understand what that process was going to be like. And so it was part of a research project they were doing to basically say, like, if we think that this works well for this piece of technology, we might introduce these kind of comics guides for lots of our other procedures. And that's still in the sort of report writing stage, so I don't know what the outcomes of that are quite yet. But yeah, so I went to see the machine and like experience all the noises that it makes, go through the whole process of like having to take off any metal jewellery and sort of go past all these signs that are basically just exclamation marks and triangles, so you know it's a bad scene.
Yeah.
But actually you go in and it's so zen, and it's sort of...
It sounds like method illustration.
Yeah, well, it would have been really hard, I think, to convey what that experience was like without having gone physically to see it. And in the end, the way I put the comic together was I did photo backgrounds and drawn characters. So in the end, actually, there aren't any drawings of MRI machines. It's all photographs of the MRI machines with children drawn into the spaces. And the final sort of booklet that we made has loads of different spaces for kids to draw on things and little puzzles for them to do. So we had all these great photos where different fruit and vegetables had been put through the MRI machine, and kids had to work out, you know, is this a sweet corn? Is this a strawberry? Like, it was really lovely. So that was a really fun project to work on, and that's one of the ones where I did have to travel a bit. But then when I come home, I did all the work in my bedroom.
So this is great because it's like, you know, you're in the art field, but this is science and art coming
and that's
together.
What I'm really interested in, is sort of these different overlaps between what are difficult concepts to explain and how can you use art to make them understandable. That's what I wrote my dissertation on.
I'm seeing a theme developing here: volunteering, working with the community, and to a point with children as well. And are those three things important to you?
Yeah, I think so. I think I mean, children are just more fun than grown-ups are. It's not grown-ups' fault, it's just how it is. So, like, and kids are a bit less like, they're more up for trying things. I do community workshops with adults and with children, and trying to get adults to let go and draw is much more difficult than trying to get kids to let go and draw.
Got you.
And I mean, I did some work with nursing students here at Glyndwr, where we did a one-off session where we were looking at patient information comics, and like it took them a while to warm up to like, oh, we're going to draw it though. It's like, yeah, they don't have to be good drawings. You just have to give it a bash, like have a doodle.
I've got a question for you.
Yes.
Sorry, just time's getting on. Bryce has asked, going back to working with clients, how do you price your illustration commissions? Is there a set model you follow, or do you treat each client differently, case by case?
Yeah, so what can be really useful for that is if you look at the, I think it's called Artists Union England. If you look for their website, they have a really detailed breakdown.
Artists Union England.
I think if it's not Artists Union England, it's the English Union of Artists or something to that effect.
Right. We'll find it and post it later.
And I suggest the England one rather than the Wales one, just because it's more current. So there is a similar thing that exists on the Arts Council Wales website, but I don't think it's been updated since about 2019. So it's a newer one on the England one anyway. And so they have a really detailed breakdown where they have a really nice graph, not a graph, like a table, that says sort of how many years experience do you have, different types of work, different number of days, and you can sort of use that to triangulate some starting points for costs for different kinds of work. So you can look at, okay, how much would it be to do a coordination project, how much to do a community workshop, how much to do a commission. So that's a good place to start if you're really not sure at all. I think another way you can do it, this is how I did it when I very first started, is you can work backwards from your living costs. So you can say, right, this month I need to make this much money. I'm going to spend this much time working for them, and you can just work it backwards to how much do you actually need to live. And if you know that you're going to meet your own needs, and usually that will, I mean, it depends who your client is and what their budget is, but you can make a really solid case then that you're not being unreasonable.
I've got to say, for someone with such a creative mind and someone who's works as an artist, you've got a very organised mind as well as a creative artist. Well, you are, no, you have, because what you just said to me, I've never thought in all my life as a creative, working for myself, I've never thought of that work backwards thing. I think that's really, really good.
Yeah, well, like, I don't think of myself as having... I think because I am so disorganised, I appreciate that I am someone who I have to impose order on myself.
Right, so you are a typical creative then. You are slightly disorganised.
Yeah. I think anyone who'd seen my desk would know that I wasn't organised.
The best desks are untidy desks, trust me. They really are. What does the future hold?
What's the future hold? So I really want to...
Did you ever plan to have a job, a full-time job like you do now? So I'm saying, what's around the corner?
Yeah,
what's on the horizon?
I suppose that this is a thing that I would want to say actually, is that like I think I went to university with this idea that like I will publish graphic novels, and that is what success will look like.
But have you published graphic novels?
No,
okay.
I don't even care though.
You don't care?
That's the thing that's interesting, because I think that it's really easy to get wedded to the ambitions that you had when you were 19, when actually like you grow and change as a person, your priorities grow and change as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that where I've arrived now is in a place where I am doing a thing that I absolutely adore, and I am able to consider in my early 30s exciting possibilities, like maybe potentially one day buying a house.
Wow.
Like it could happen. Do you know what I mean? So like I think that it's important to think about like what does actual success look like for you, and for some people that will look like, well, actually, I want to move to London and I want to have this very specific type of success experience. But for me, I don't, that's not where the rewards that I'm looking for are. They are in being part of a community and having deep roots in that community and feeling like the work I'm doing is worthwhile and valued by the people that I'm working with.
Yeah, well, from what you've told us, that sounds very worthwhile. Before we run out of time, we've got a question from the audience. If you'd just like to step forward here a second and speak into this mic so everyone can hear you, and just tell us your question for Heather.
Just quickly, basically, you said that you don't really use social media, which is, I was shocked by that, because most people who are in the artist industry are drumming it into us, particularly at this stage, that it's really important to have a big sort of following, a big presence on social media. So you decided to really use Instagram. Why did you decide Instagram? Because I struggle on Instagram getting followers and what have you, unless you're prepared to pay for it.
Right, that's a really interesting, yeah.
You don't need this.
Okay, oh yeah, I've got this one.
Yeah, you got that one, yeah.
So,
thank you.
Oh, there's like a lot of parts to that question. So I think that why Instagram? It's because it's visual. Pictures work there in a way that is not always true on every site. It gives you, what's nice about Instagram is you've got a consistent format. It's really nice to make grids of pictures that look good together. And you've got, it's like easy to find other people that are doing the thing that you're doing. The tag system is way more efficient on Instagram than I think it is on Twitter.
Do you find much work coming from there?
Do you find much work coming from there?
I think that's the thing, is that I think it's a mistake to think of social media as the first place through which you get clients. Like for me, at least in my experience, the way you get clients is that you go and look for them. I think if you sit back and wait for them to come to you, you're sort of giving yourself much more to do, because you are going to have to run around and get all of these followers.
Do you find yourself like following people that you admire and trying to make connections there?
Yeah, I think that's one way to do it for sure. But I think that ultimately, I think that rather than thinking about trying to be update all the time and posting every day and setting that kind of pressure, I think it's quite good to think of it in terms of another place to have a portfolio. So like the first place a person's going to go if they want to look at my art is going to be Instagram or my website, and I want those two things to feel similar to each other and to be reflective of each other. And
do they link to each other?
They link to each other, yeah.
That's important.
And and I feel like an Instagram link for me, it's like, it's a thing that goes on the bottom of your emails to people so that they can contextualize you when you approach them and check you out and be like, oh yeah, that does make sense for what we're doing. I don't know, I do feel like I'm giving you conflicting advice from other people,
No,
but I think that if you know who you want to do work for, then like curate something that is going to impress them and get in touch with them specifically and tell them, this is why I find your organisation inspirational and this is why I want to work for you. Because you can amass hundreds or thousands even of followers, and if they're not people who like you want to engage with, then what is the value of it? And it's slightly different, I suppose, if you are really going to focus on a sort of a shop-led kind of model. Like if what your kind of artistic business looks like is, I'm going to sell prints and greetings cards and products, then amassing followers as customers, I think that's a different way of going about it. But I think it depends what your specific business is. My experience of it is, it's not the best use of your emotional energy and time, which are priceless artifacts.
And talking about time, you've got a full-time job now. You've had a full-time job at TPUB since January.
Yeah.
How does that affect your commissions and your illustration?
Massively. So like there are a lot of things that in terms of the size of a project, just automatically can let them go because I'm just not realistically going to be able to do them. And that's fine, I'm all right with that, because now that I've got this network of people who I know who to pass those jobs to, I know who's a good fit for things that come to me. And I think
there's that community spirit again.
And I also know like that there are a lot more of the jobs that used to come to me that were for no money that I can think about now. So particularly when I say no money, I mean just like unreasonably cheap money or like...
No, I get it.
Yeah, so for example, and I don't want them to think that I'm saying they're unreasonably cheap, but for example, if there's a charity organisation that gets in touch with me now and they say, we would really like a poster for this campaign that we're doing, we have a budget of 0, can you do it? I can say yes to that now in a way that I wouldn't have been able to before, when my freelancing time needed to be about generating an income for myself.
So if it appeals to you, you'll do it.
Yeah, but
and
also,
you can fit it in and do it properly, obviously.
Yeah, if it makes sense. They still have to like be thoughtful about like your mental health and your actual capacity as an individual human. And I think this is a particular weakness for me. This is something that I have to come back to all of the time and be like, am I taking too many things on? Am I doing too much? Because like in addition to having a job and doing freelance work, also one of the directors at Calon FM, which is the community radio station, and I also do lots of other voluntary work for other people. So like you have to be thoughtful about what you're going to do.
Of course.
And you also have to be like thoughtful about what your role is in the ecosystem if you're going to do work for free. So like for a charity, I think that that's like totally fine. We all appreciate that that's money that they can then put towards another resource. If a job just sounded fun though, and it was still for a business, and I was just like, oh, I would really like to do a design for that, but they want it for free, part of me would be like, I don't really want to take that work on because I want them to acknowledge that illustrators are skilled people who they should pay money to. So it's like, that's...
How do you respond? Because I know lots of stories of creatives who get that email going, we should collaborate, blah, 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 I'm a big admirer of your work, but how do you respond to someone who says we've got no money?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, it just depends really what it is. If I do think they're a genuine...
No, but if it's something that you think, well, they're just chancing their arm, how would you respond?
I don't need to respond, do
Exactly, ignore it, right? Well, to wrap up, you're not the first creative and the first guest we've had who started off on this path, but then ended up taking all the forks in the road. I think that's a common theme. If you could go back to your younger self, running through the fields of Cumbria, what would you say to yourself?
Ah, you're right.
Yes? That's what everyone says.
I don't know. What would be actually useful? I don't know. I think in many ways I would rather that she had stuff to say to me, to be honest, because I think she had a much better idea of like what was going on, because the world is simpler for you when you're younger, so you're much more decisive. You're not weighing as many different complexities, so you just have strongly held opinions that are wrong, but you're very confident about them, so it's fine. And I miss that about myself.
You still sound very confident now, and you've had, and of all the guests, you've had the best shirt so far as well.
Obviously.
Yeah, obviously. So Heather Wilson, if people want to get in touch with you or TPOUB, just go. It's tpoub.wales.
tpoub.wales.
And then you can search Big Ideas Wales.
Search Big Ideas Wales.
And it's what's this Heather's Miss? What's it called? Your comic thing?
Oh,
Miss Heather Comics.
Miss Heather Comics.
You forgot as well.
No, I didn't know if you meant the website or social media or what have you.
But what's the website address?
Well, the website address is missheather.rocks because it was cheaper than .com, and that is savvy business decisions.
One final question, one thing that confused me in your little
yes.
actually it sounded blurb. How can you have a zingy pastel? Surely a pastel's a pastel.
Right, a zingy pastel.
Even a love heart is not zingy, but it's pastel. How can it be zingy?
A zingy pastel is like when you get your hair dyed.
I wouldn't know about that, would I?
And you want like a pastel colour, but the first day that you've done it, it's not really pastel yet. You like have to wash it once.
Right.
But that colour before it washes, I feel like is zingy. But that phrase is coined by Joe Marsh, who's the creative director at TPOUB. And I was like, I've got to write a blurb. How do I...
Right,
this is not for this one.
I've got
she's
to be
like,
honest.
how would I describe my artwork? And she's like, it's like zingy pastels, isn't it?
Right. Well, great answer, but it's probably a question that doesn't really apply to me. The answer doesn't really apply to me. Heather Wilson, thank you very much for joining us on Great Futures.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been lovely.